And so I'll start by saying I'm a skeptic. So I 100% understand people would doubt this, and I'm okay with it. I debated even about posting this, but I figured why not? I graduated from a small town in upstate New York in a region known as the Thousand Islands. Yes, like the dressing. It was invented there. Anyways, we have far more open land or woods than people. If you look across St. Lawrence River, you can see Canada. Now that you know the setting. When I moved there my junior year of high school, I quickly learned the summer party spot was Wilson Bays Beach in Cape Vincent. With that beach came a lady who collected all of our beer cans and eventually bought a truck with all the money she got from all of our cans over the years, and a legend of what they called fox monkey. It was an animal that walked like a monkey but looked like a fox, and had been seen and heard at the beach and its surrounding areas. I, as any sane person would be, was extremely skeptical when my loser high school boyfriend I wasn't smart enough to leave behind yet told me of this creature. He claimed to have heard weird things out on the beach at night, and there was a homeless man out there for a short while who also said he heard it and saw some weird things out there at night. Fast forward a few years, and I'm in my early 20s driving around with my two best friends showing some guys we met from out of town around the area. This ride led us to the beach at night and then the surrounding area. We were all laughing and talking while on the back road driving away from the beach. All of a sudden, we see that infamous glint of an animal's eyes on the side of the road ready to cross. If you live in a rural area, you know how your automatic reaction is to slow down because you probably have at least one dent from a rogue deer on your car. I stopped to let it pass, and something roughly the size of a small coyote that looked like a dog and wolf mix with dark and longer thick fur. We didn't even think anything of it until it got to the side of the road and stopped for a second, then stood up and walked away on two legs like a human. None of us said anything for a minute, and I said, did anyone else see that? And all four of the other passengers looked shocked, and they all replied something along the lines of, yeah, what the hell was that? Me and my two best friends talk about it to this day, and all recall it the same way. We call it fox monkey because that's the name that we heard and the only way we can semi-accurately refer to it. Still have no idea what it was, but all three of us agree that it was one of the scarier or most disturbing experiences of our lives. The animal never threatened us, but left us all extremely frightened. When I was about 9 to 10 years old, my uncle told me about a story that has stuck with me ever since. Growing up in Kentucky, I've always heard stories of, Bigfoot, the Poplar Goat Man, the usual run-of-the-mill urban legend campfire stories. But in the case of this story that my uncle had told me, it was different than all of the other tall tales that I've heard before or since. Kentucky is home of the largest cave system in the world, Mammoth Cave. Since its founding on July 1st, 1941, only 365 miles have been surveyed by the human eye. It's believed that there is still 600 miles of passageways and caverns yet to be discovered. The national park is stretched over 3 counties, spanning more than 50,000 acres: Edmonson, Hart, and Barron counties. My uncle owned land in Edmonson County since the 1980s. I remember hearing about how when they were out hunting for deer, they occasionally would come to pits in the ground of various sizes. They were the mouths of cave entrances. They would usually just toss a barrel or a large branch into the hole, so no one would stumble across it, fall in, and become trapped. Besides wildlife or just getting lost in the woods, there wasn't really much else you can be worried about, according to most people. This story takes place in the early 1990s, about 5 years after my uncle purchased the land. His closest neighbor, who I'll call Ken, lived about a half a mile down a dirt road that ran parallel through both of their properties. They naturally became good friends over time, and on occasion would accompany each other hunting. My uncle lived in Louisville and would visit his property when he had days off or needed to do some upkeeping, like mowing a lawn or restocking his pond. So, unlike his neighbor Ken, he spent more than most of the year in Louisville. On this particular weekend, Ken went out hunting for deer. He left his cabin and headed out for the woods as he had done 100 times before. He followed a path that he had used plenty of time to a small grouping of trees overlooking a large meadow. According to him, it was a perfect sunny fall day with not many clouds in the sky. He sat in the shadows underneath some low-hanging tree branches, feeling hidden from any would-be prey that might come by. Despite it being the ideal weather for hunting, he didn't see much in terms of game. Just a few fawn and a doe, not the big trophy buck he was hoping for. He had been entertaining the idea of just grabbing his gear and heading back to the cabin, but not wanting to go home empty-handed, he decided to stick around just for a little bit longer, in hopes his luck would change. His chest fluttered when he looked across the meadow to the left and seen movement in the tree line opposite of him. He pulled his rifle to his shoulder and looked down the scope. The thick trees and foliage at the end of the tree line prevented him from getting a good view of the animal in his sights. But from what he can tell, it was heading towards the end of the woods. He just had to be patient. When he stepped out of the shadow of the trees about 50 yards away and into the clearing, he immediately knew that he wasn't looking at a deer. He tried to keep his hands steady from shaking his rifle as he desperately tried to identify exactly what it was he was looking at. He described its body that of a panther, but the upper torso where the shoulders and neck were sat noticeably higher than his lower back and hind legs. He was looking at its side profile, which he claimed while in the mid-stride, this thing had to be close to 7 feet in length. He said it was quiet, like a cat. It never made any noise when it moved. The front legs, he said, looked more like arms, specifically longer and skinnier than its hind legs. It had brittle, dark brown hair that started from the back of his head and running down the length of his back, like a hyena. He also claimed that the creature's skin looked waxy, almost like a chimpanzee's skin, dark brown, almost black. Its face was long like a dog's, but he said he noticed no ears. He said the corner of his mouth ended by the neck, where the ears should have been. The most unsettling detail I can remember of his account, though, was the thing's back legs. He described them as looking frog-like, as in the back legs were tucked up close to the creature's sides. When it walked, the leading leg would reach almost to the front half of his body and the other leg would stretch way back, like that of a frog when it crawls. He watched it for about like 2 or 3 minutes, slowly and quietly moving through the long golden grass, black shadows surrounded by color. He watched it disappear in the tree line directly across from the woods he'd seen it come from initially. After a few moments, he left and headed back to his cabin. Now, I don't know how long it was after this incident occurred that Ken told my uncle about it, and he was reluctant to speak on it. He dubbed it the Kentucky Holler Crawler. Eventually, Ken explained the story in full one night while they sat around the fire. Ever since then, Ken refused to go into the woods. He claimed to only hunt from the dirt road running through his property afterwards. Both my uncle and Ken sadly passed away since, but their story never changed over the years. I even had my uncle retell the story to me a few years back, just so I knew I had all of the details right. Maybe this was just another tall tale used to scare me and my brother when we were kids, camping on my uncle's land. But I know one thing for sure, he was an honest man, and his eyes told me the truth when he told me that story. He had his fair share of unexplainable incidents as well. I'm sure anybody after frequenting a cabin in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky for over 30 years. The thing that keeps me up at night, though, isn't the thought of the creature. It's the thought of where it came from. Who's to say this thing didn't crawl up from the caves, spanning from hundreds of miles in every direction? Hidden from civilization, thriving off the ecosystem? Nothing is impossible when it comes to nature. Nobody really knows for sure what is out there in the dark. Hello everyone. A little backstory for me to explain what I believe is a possible skinwalker encounter about a year and a half ago. I'm a 27-year-old man and I've lived in Utah my whole life. I used to be part of a church until I was about 14 because I didn't believe and had questions that seemed to have answers that didn't make sense or had holes in them. The reason why I say this is because I have known about skinwalkers and wendigos from an early age. Being in Utah, we all hear about them and about Skinwalker Ranch. The whole Native American stories just seemed to make sense to me, and I was told that speaking of skinwalkers will put you on a metaphorical list for them to hunt you or something of the sort, which I hope is not true. Anyways, as I'm 18 years old, I started dating a girl whose family was Native American, and I think she was part of Shoshone. I can't remember. Well, after a year or two of dating her, I got to visit her reservation where her tribe was from, which was in Pocatello, Idaho. Her grandfather was full-blooded Native American. He was the top guy, chief or something like that. I can't honestly remember. At dinner, a few days into the stay, I asked him about wendigos and skinwalkers. The dinner table got very quiet really fast. He told me not to bring that subject up during dinner. Later that night, he came to my room and told me about them, the history of them, how they came about, etc. He spoke of them in a serious yet cautious manner, like how a parent warns their child about something and tries to teach and explain of the dangers to something. I don't know the actual word for it right now, but you know what I mean. After that night, I didn't speak of them, think about them, and tried to avoid conversations about them due to what her grandfather had told me. I don't know if he was trying to screw with me because I'm a typical white guy or whatever. I don't know. But honestly, I believe the stories and the history of it all. So here goes the encounter. A couple of years down the road, her and I split due to us falling apart. And then a couple of years after that, I met my wife in 2019. We got married in March 2022 and found out we were pregnant in July of 2022. We were happy and nervous for our lives ahead of us. After about a week or so of finding out, we decided to go camping to see if it may be one of the few things that we had to ourselves before the kid came. So we went up to Affleck Park Campground by Salt Lake City in the Wasatch Mountains. The campground was completely empty. We didn't see any other tents or cars. We got all set up and had dinner and talked over the fire and hung out. Well, it was bedtime. We got in our tents and we talked a little bit more. Both of us heard what we assumed was just rats or little animals walking around the bushes and trees. We fell asleep after a while. While we were asleep, I had this dream, or what I hoped or thought it was. This dream was that I was asleep in my tent with my wife at the same campground right where I was physically at, and there was rustling of the bushes and trees and an ominous feeling of dread or fear in the air. There was something circling our tent, looking at the tent, and I can feel it wanted to be inside the tent with us. The next part I remember as if I were awake, watching it happen in real time. This dog, wolf, black as a bottomless pit with sharp yellow eyes, stood over us while we slept, just watching us. Almost like an out-of-body experience. While this black dog wolf just stood over us while we were asleep, in the dream of course. I was awake having a feeling of this unknown beast was standing over us and watching us sleep. I pretended to be asleep by keeping my eyes shut, but I can feel it staring at me as if it knew I was faking being asleep. The dog wolf just stood over my wife, watching us the whole night while I pretended to be asleep in my dream. When I woke up in the morning, I remember peeking my eyes open, checking to see if anything was there. Nothing. The tent zipper was all the way closed. I asked my wife if she had a weird dream last night. She said she did, but she didn't say much after that regarding dreams. After getting dressed, I packed us up in a hurry, skipping breakfast and left. A year and a half later, I still remember the feeling of the dog wolf with its yellow eyes staring at me, as if it knew my conscious self was aware of what was going on. At work last week, a coworker brought up this subject of skinwalkers and wendigos. At the sound of the subject, those feeling of dread and fear and helplessness enter my body, and I feel my hairs raise. Being a construction worker for a little over 5 years, I wouldn't say that I'm a badass at all, but I'm used to being in uncomfortable situations, but I became scared looking for a way out. I could just see those eyes if they were right in front of me. Would this be considered an encounter? If not, totally understand. I remember being taught that skinwalkers can enter one's mind through dreams. So sorry for the long post. I just felt like I needed to get this out there. I live in a kind of rural part of Utah now, and I get up in the middle of the night about once every week or every 2 weeks or so, and I look out the window to check the field across from my third-story condo just to look to see if anything is unnatural. Am I crazy for letting this dream get to me, or not? Good evening, everyone. This is Yuri K, and this is the end of the video. Please leave a comment and let us know your opinions on the matter. If you happen to like this content, please check out our other videos. Make sure you like and share amongst your friends and family to help our community grow. You happen to be new to this channel? Please make sure you subscribe. It's free and you can always change it in the future. You have some terrifying story suggestions? If so, make sure that you send it to my email, fearofthedarkstories@gmail.com, and I'll feature it in a future segment. But you guys stay safe out there, and remember to always be afraid of the dark.